Hello, welcome back to our study of the book of Revelation. Today we are in chapter 14, and we see in Revelation chapter 14 some contrasts to what we saw in chapter 13. So as I read it, listen for the contrasts that you hear. So let me start. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters, and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps, and they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they kept themselves pure. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among men and offered as firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. Then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." A second angel followed and said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries." A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on the forehead and on the hand, he too will drink of the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. He will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment rises forever and ever. There is no rest, day or night, for those who worship the beast and his image, or for anyone who receives the mark of his name. This calls for patient endurance on the part of the saints, who obey God's commandments and remain faithful to Jesus." Then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." "Yes," says the Spirit, "they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them." And I looked, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like a son of man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Then another angel came out of the temple and called in a loud voice to him who was sitting on the cloud, "Take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come. For the harvest of the earth is ripe." So he who was seated on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Still another angel, who had charge of the fire, came from the altar, and called in a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, Take your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the earth's vine, because its grapes are ripe." The angel swung his sickle on the earth, gathered its grapes, and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city, and blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as the horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia. So what we see in chapter 14 is a response to what we saw in chapter 13. In chapter 13, we saw the beast and his false prophet, who made everyone to take a number or his name on their right hand or forehead as a mark. And we see contrasts here, because instead of Babylon, we see Zion. Instead of the mark of the beast, we see the seal of the Lamb. Instead of spiritual fornication, we see spiritual purity. We see a contrast between God's blessings and God's wrath. And so what do we see here? We see the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. And Mount Zion, often in the Bible, represented Jerusalem, the city of God. And it represents spiritually God's true spiritual dwelling place. And those who followed the beast took the mark of the beast, his name or his number. But here we see God's people who belong to him are sealed. It says, and with him 144,000 who had his name, that's the Lamb, and his Father's name written on their foreheads. So instead of having a mark of the beast, they have a mark or a seal of the Lamb and of the Father. And how many are there? 144,000. Now this has been an issue that people have debated over much time as who are the 144,000? Are these the people who will be saved in the tribulation? Are these the people of Israel who will be saved? Commentators now are thinking that probably this is a symbolic number because in Jewish numbering, 12 represents God's people. And what we have in 144,000 is 12 squared multiplied by 1,000. So this would be like the full, complete number of God's people. All of those who ever have, who ever will belong to the Lamb are sealed. And he says, I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like the loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps. And they sing a new song before the throne and before the living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they kept themselves pure. So what we're seeing is here's the number of people who have been redeemed out of the earth. The fullness, the full people of God has been redeemed. And they are people who have not defiled themselves. No, you don't want to get confused here. He isn't talking about virginity in the physical sense. The Bible never makes sex between a husband and wife a dirty or evil thing. No. But it talks often about when the people of Israel would follow idols, they're called to be in fornication, to be unfaithful to their true love. And so what we're seeing here is before we saw people who prostituted themselves by following the beasts, but these people have remained pure. They have not fallen captive to spiritual adultery or idolatry. They have not worshipped the mark, or what do you call it, the image of the beast. Instead, they have remained faithful, and it says they follow the Lamb wherever they go, wherever he goes. And so what we see here is a picture of discipleship. These people, the ones who belong to Christ, follow him wherever he goes. And that's the way true disciples are supposed to be. And they have been purchased from among men. How are they purchased? By the sacrifice of Christ, and they are offered as first fruits to God. Now, first fruits here doesn't mean that there's more to come. Rather, first fruits is talking about the offering. If you go back all the way to Genesis, Abel gave his best lamb. And we talk about the first fruits is about giving the best and giving an acceptable offering to God. And so these that have been redeemed out of the earth are given up to God as a acceptable and pleasing offering because no lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless, just like that lamb that Abel offered to God, who was the best from his flock. God's people have been offered up to him in that way. And so we see a contrast here between the people who follow the beast and the people who follow the Lamb. Some are marked with the mark of the beast. Others are sealed with the seal of the Lamb. And they have a song of worship that only they can sing. And you think about that. Yes, the angels worship. Yes, creation worships. But there must be a song that only those who have been saved by grace through faith by the blood of Jesus can sing and worship to him. There has to be something special about it. There's something special about people. We were created in the image of God. We were created to worship God in a way that no one else, no other thing in creation can, because we were made in his image. And humankind fell away, but Christ came to redeem people to him. And so those who have come to him, there's a special song of praise that really only they can sing, because they're the only ones who have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. And then after this, we see three angels. And these three angels come, and what do? They give a warning. They issue proclamations. The first angel says, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." So the first angel's bringing this gospel message to who? To the whole earth. So the whole earth is going to hear this good news. And he's telling them, come to God. Fear him and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. So here's this call to turn to Christ, a call to turn to God, recognizing that there is coming a time of judgment. Then the second angel followed, and he says, Fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries. What do we see here? What does Babylon represent? Babylon represents the power of the world, the worldly power. Babylon was used often in the New Testament as a code for Rome, recognizing the secular seat of authority, the secular seat of power. And this angel is saying, Babylon has fallen. Earthly power has fallen in the face of God's Lamb. And then a third angel follows and says in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on the forehead or on the hand, he too will drink the wine of God's fury." So we've had a gospel proclamation. Then we've seen that the systems of the world have collapsed. And now anyone who worships the beast or has his mark will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. This is such a warning. He's not going to get a little bit of wrath. No, they will get God's full wrath. And it says, he will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment rises forever and ever. There is no rest, day or night, for those who worship the beast in his image, or anyone who receives the mark of his name. This is the result of turning away from God. God is just. We don't like to talk about the reality of hell and suffering. And I think that when we look at this, you could say it's like God and the angels are punishing these people in hell. But I don't really think that's the way that we need to look at this. Rather, it's like they are witnesses to the truth of this reality, that those who turn against God will receive God's wrath as the reward for their evil. So God basically turns them over to the evil that they have chosen, because you remember they chose it. They've been warned, they've heard the gospel, and now they are receiving the just results for their choices. And so we need to recognize that there is really a punishment for those who refuse to accept God, and they are given over to the object of their worship, which is evil and sin. And it's just not a good place to be. There is no rest. And the torment goes on forever and ever. And he says, this calls for patient endurance on the part of the saints who obey God's commandments and remain faithful to Jesus. And so there's a warning to the world. Turn to God. There's the good news. Turn, or you will suffer. But now God's people, we hear these warnings to the world, and it reminds us to remain faithful to Jesus and to keep walking in obedience to his commandments. So the warning for the world is not a warning for the church and that we are going to suffer, but it does remind us to continue on the path. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." What a blessing. This is a reality. Those who die in the Lord are blessed. This is not talking just about martyrdom. This is just talking about those who give their lives or who live their lives in faithful obedience to Christ. Their death is blessed. And what is the blessing they receive? Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them. So again, we have that contrast. Those who are suffering will receive no rest. Those who have turned to God and obey him and remain faithful to Jesus enter into his rest. Now we get into the last part here, but I just want to remind you that judgment is God's righteous response to those who refuse to obey him or to accept his love. God is just. He is holy. He is righteous. And he will judge those who have turned to sin and evil. And finally it says, I looked out, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like a son of man. This is a picture of Christ. Jesus called himself the Son of Man, and he has a crown on his head and a sharp sickle. So what are we seeing here? It is Jesus who will preside over God's judgment, because here he is. He's sitting on the cloud with a crown and a sickle, and then the other angel comes and calls out, take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come. So when it is time, when God is announcing his time, this angel isn't giving a command to Christ. Rather, he is announcing God's message that the time has come, and who is going to reap from the earth? The Son of Man is going to swing his sickle over the earth and reap out of it. In other words, the day is coming when God is ready, and Christ is going to reap from the earth and bring it to judgment. God will gather the people from all over the world, and Christ himself will sit in judgment. And what happens? Those who are harvested up from the earth are thrown into the winepress of God's wrath, and they are trampled. Those who belong to Christ enter rest. Those who don't are going to be swept up to face judgment and to receive the reward, which is separation from God. It's hell. It's torment. This isn't pleasant for us. We don't really like to think about God's judgment or about hell, but it is a reality. And we need to be like the angel, taking the good news to the people, giving them the opportunity to hear. Because here's the thing, if you're listening to this today, if you're hearing this word today, you don't have to end up in torment. You don't have to end up separated from God. You don't have to end up reaping the fullness of God's wrath. Instead, you have the opportunity to put your faith in Jesus Christ. So God is giving you mercy today. If you are hearing this, God is giving you mercy right now to give you the opportunity to turn to Him, so that if you remain faithful to Him till the end, your death will be a blessing to you, and you will enter into God's rest. Not necessarily the easiest passage to stomach, because we just want everybody to be good and saved. But Christ is coming to judge. He is the conquering lamb. He has paid the price. He has done everything for us to be saved, and He is also the true and righteous judge. And the day of His judgment will come upon the earth. Are you ready?